Hi guys, Jane here, and today I am reviewing Cinder. I know by Marissa Meyer. I know a lot of people on BookTube have read Cinder and the rest of the Lunar Chronicles. I am probably quite behind, having not read it. This is my first exploration into this world. I definitely understand why it is so popular, and I definitely enjoyed it. For anybody who has been living under a rock like I had, I will tell you a little bit about this book. It was really sold to me as a Cinderella retelling, and it kind of is, but there's some major elements that are different, some of which I won't go into because it's spoilers, but I was not entirely prepared for certain elements because I thought we were following the Cinderella story, and some things happened and I was like, oh, okay, we're doing that, huh? So Cinder is a cyborg. She was a human at one point as a child, but she was in an accident and they had to replace parts of her body with machine. She doesn't have any memory of her life before becoming a cyborg. She was told that her injuries happened because of a hoverboard accident, but she doesn't really know. She was adopted by a man. I can't remember his name, but he died shortly after adopting her, and that's how she ended up with her stepmother and two sisters. Now, the stepmother is the evil stepmother, and one of the sisters kind of is too, but one of the sisters is actually close to Cinder and really a cool character. I really liked her in this book. Cinder is also a mechanic, so the son of the emperor comes to her and he wants an android repaired because she's supposed to be the best. And he does not know she's a cyborg, and he kind of starts flirting with her, and she flirts back, and she starts to really like him. And that's a problem because cyborgs in her world are really looked down upon. And I'll be honest, I didn't entirely understand why. One thing they talk about is like the value of the life of a cyborg is less because they've already had a second chance. And that I understood, but just why cyborgs are so hated and treated so badly, I didn't really get. It is a futuristic sci-fi world, so there are certain elements. I don't read a ton of sci-fi, but I will say, even if you don't read a ton of sci-fi, this is a pretty friendly series as far as it doesn't take a lot to figure out. You don't have to be real techie. It's a really good series if you're if sci-fi isn't really your thing, but you want something to try something with a little bit of sci-fi elements. It is a futuristic world. There's some cool stuff, but it definitely in some ways read more like a YA than an adult, but I think it's supposed to be adult. I did give it a 4 out of 5. Overall, I really love Cinder. I think one thing that really stood out to me that was different in a good way than the fairy tale is Cinder is a very active protagonist. She is spending the whole book trying to make her situation better. She's making stuff happen. She's very active. And I thought in the original fairy tale, Cinderella was kind of passive. You know, Cinderella in the original fairy tale story doesn't do much to make her a lot better. She goes and cries in a tree, but in front of a tree, her mother's grave, in the Grimm's fairy tale version. And I think in the Disney version, if I recall, she just kind of cries after the mice make the dress for her. And then the sisters tear it up, she goes and cries, and the fairy godmother comes and saves her. But she is not a very active in the original stories. She's not as active as a protagonist as she is in this one. The main thing that didn't work for me and that I didn't like was the ending. I saw a lot of stuff coming and I was fine with that. Like, it all happened. I knew what was going to happen pretty early on. Some of the big reveals, as a matter of fact, by about disc 3, I was like, okay, this is what I think is going to happen. I was telling my daughter because she listened to part of it with me. And most of that did happen, but the very ending was not what I was expecting. And I don't want to say I'm disappointed because I wasn't really disappointed, but it's a little bit of a cliffhanger. And I'm not entirely sure how that's going to move into the next book in the series. So I haven't started reading Scarlet yet, which is, I believe, the next book. But I'm hoping that we find out more about what happens with Cinder, because her story just kind of let off and not the way I was expecting, and not a nice, neat wrap up. So I'm hoping it gets wrapped up somewhere throughout the series. Otherwise, I'm going to be really, really annoyed. Other than that, I really, truly enjoyed this book. I enjoyed the world building. I enjoyed the characters. I liked the prince. I thought he was a fairly sympathetic character throughout most of it. He was a jerk sometimes, or made dumb. I shouldn't say he was a jerk. He made really bad decisions for really good reasons throughout some of the book, or he was not as strong of a character as I would have liked him to be. But again, it was a good story, and I understood why he did what he did. I did really enjoy the sci-fi elements. There's a lot of cool stuff happening. It's a cool plot. I don't want to give too much away because anything I say I feel like is going to spoil it. But if you haven't read the Lunar Chronicles, I recommend it. I really, really, truly recommend it, especially if you want something that's kind of sci-fi, but not hard. I read a lot of YA fantasy, and this kind of had that vibe to it. I felt like it had a real nice exploration of the world. It wasn't complicated to the point that I was like, oh my gosh, all this stuff is over my head. It took me a little bit in the beginning to catch up to the world, but the world building was excellent. I understood what was going on pretty quickly. Yeah, I really can't recommend enough. It was really good. Again, the only thing that kind of didn't work for me was the ending. Another thing that is a positive is this takes place in New Beijing. So I'm assuming that is like the futuristic Beijing. And so there's some diversity of characters. And that didn't play a huge part in the story, like the old Beijing versus the new Beijing, just that the world had been in a war and there was peace. But it was interesting, and they had like an emperor versus a king, and there was stuff that just really cool little bits and pieces that I enjoyed. So if you've read it and you loved it or didn't, please leave a comment below, let me know. Also, my social media is down there along with the like and subscribe button. This is Jane. See you next time. Bye.